Number 1. The Hollow Earth. In 1692, Edmund Halley, the same man who predicted the return of the comet that bears his name, proposed that the Earth contained nested concentric spheres, each potentially habitable, each lit by a luminous atmosphere. This was not fringe speculation at the time. It was a serious hypothesis from one of England's most respected scientists, published in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society. More than a century later, an American Army officer named John Cleves Symmes took the idea further. In the 1820s, Symmes campaigned publicly for Congress to fund an expedition to the North Pole, where he believed a physical opening led to the interior. He petitioned, he lectured, he printed pamphlets. Congress declined. But the idea did not die. By the 1930s, the Nazi regime had embraced not one, but two competing versions of the hollow Earth simultaneously. The first was the classic model, a habitable interior accessed through polar openings. The second was stranger, known as the Holveltlehre, or inverted Earth theory. It proposed that humanity already lives on the inside of a concave sphere. The sky above us in this model is the center of the Earth. The stars are ice crystals suspended in a mass of blue gas. This second version traces back to Cyrus Teed, an American eclectic physician who called himself Koresh and founded a commune in Chicago in 1888. A parallel German group adopted similar ideas independently, and segments of the Nazi hierarchy accepted the concave model as viable. How viable? Hitler reportedly sent Dr. Heinz Fischer and a team equipped with powerful telescopic cameras to the Baltic island of Rügen. Their mission was not to spy across the sea, it was to aim the cameras upward, attempting to photograph the British fleet on the opposite interior surface of the concave Earth. The cameras captured nothing but sky. The classic hollow Earth model had its own operational chapter. In December 1938, the Neuschwabenland expedition departed Hamburg under Captain Alfred Richer aboard the catamaran ship MS Schwabenland. The official purpose was economic. Germany depended heavily on Norwegian whale oil for margarine and soap production. Establishing an independent whaling station in Antarctica would reduce that dependency. The expedition mapped roughly 250,000 square kilometers of Queen Maud land. Teams planted Nazi flags. Dornier flying boats dropped iron swastikas from the air to mark territorial claims. The region was renamed Neuschwabenland. Norway discovered these activities almost by accident. The wife of deputy expedition leader Ernst Hermann phoned Norwegian geologist Adolf Hoel, and the conversation revealed what Germany had done. Norway rushed to declare the sector Norwegian territory on January 14, 1939. No permanent base or whaling station was ever built. All German claims were formally abandoned in 1945, but Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz reportedly spoke of an impregnable fortress, a paradise-like oasis in the middle of eternal ice. That quote has fueled speculation ever since. Then came Operation High Jump. In 1946, Admiral Richard Byrd led a massive American expedition to Antarctica, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, 4,700 personnel. Officially a training and mapping mission, it was scheduled for 6 months. It ended after just 2.5. Byrd reportedly told a Chilean newspaper that the United States should prepare for fighters capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. That quote, stripped from context, has been repurposed by conspiracy theorists for decades. The Vril Society, connected to the medium Maria Orsic, wove the hollow Earth into a broader mythology: Atlantean refugees, anti-gravity propulsion, flying saucers launched from polar bases. A letter allegedly written by Carl Unger aboard U-boat 209 claims the crew reached the Earth's interior and did not intend to return. No verification exists for this document. Purported Third Reich maps showing U-boat passages to an inner kingdom called Agartha have circulated since the post-war era with no authenticated provenance. The concept of Agartha, a subterranean realm beneath the Himalayas or Gobi Desert, was popularized by Ferdinand Ossendowski's 1922 book Beasts, Men and Gods. Swedish explorer Sven Hedin debunked it in 1925. Modern seismic wave analysis has comprehensively disproved all hollow Earth models. Earthquake waves pass through 4 distinct layers: crust, mantle, liquid outer core, and solid inner core, composed of rock and nickel-iron alloy. There is no cavity. There is no opening. The mainstream explanation for high jump is a Cold War logistics exercise ended early by harsh weather and ice damage. The New Schwabenland expedition was straightforward resource scouting consistent with Germany's whale oil dependency. The archaeological and historical perspective suggests hollow earth narratives reflect genuine ancient cosmologies, Norse Svartalfheim, Greek Hades, Hindu Pateli, that fed into 19th century pseudo-exploration and from there into Nazi ideology. The fringe view holds that polar openings exist but are concealed by governments, that satellite imagery is doctored, and that Byrd's early withdrawal was a military retreat. No physical evidence supports this position, but if the Nazis were willing to aim cameras at the sky from Rügen, hoping to photograph England, what else were they willing to believe about ancient knowledge? Number 2. Ancient superweapons and Vimanas. Nazi leadership sent expeditions to India and Tibet annually beginning in the 1930s, partly to gather Sanskrit texts describing ancient flying craft. What they found in those texts was remarkably specific. The Vimanika Shastra, rediscovered in an Indian temple in 1875 and attributed to Bharadvajya the Wise, dated to the 4th century BC, but drawing on older sources, contained 230 stanzas. These covered construction, takeoff, cruising, normal and emergency landing procedures, and even bird collision avoidance for vehicles called Vimanas. The Mahabharata's Dronaparva section and the Ramayana both describe Vimanas as sphere-shaped craft propelled at great speed by mercury-generated wind, capable of multi-directional movement at the pilot's will. The Samar described them as iron machines, smooth and well-knit, with a charge of mercury that produced a roaring flame from the rear. The Samarangana Sutradhara provided construction details, a body like a great flying bird made of light material, with a mercury engine and an iron heating apparatus underneath. To put this in modern terms, these texts describe at least 4 vehicle types: disc-shaped craft, cylindrical or cigar-shaped craft, double-decked circular vehicles with portholes and a dome, and elongated solar-powered blimp-like vessels. The Vimanika Shastri reference 31 essential parts, 16 special metals described as light-absorbing and heat-resistant, including materials called somaka, sound-alike, and morthwika, along with 7 types of mirrors and lenses, and a device called a pendula mirror, described as a visual shield against hostile rays. V. Raghavan, retired head of the University of Madras Sanskrit Department, stated that 50 years of studying ancient texts convinced him of extraterrestrial visitation dating to 4000 BC. Italian scientist Roberto Pinotti compared Vimana descriptions to modern jet aircraft at the World Space Conference, calling certain passages too precise and technological to be dismissed as myth. The weapons described in these texts are equally striking. The Mahabharata references a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe, producing an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns. Excavations at Mohenjo-Daro reportedly found skeletons lying in streets, some holding hands, with radioactivity levels comparable to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This claim is frequently cited by ancient astronaut theorists but disputed by mainstream archaeologists who note that the radioactivity measurements have never been independently replicated. Vitrified stone walls, stone fused by extreme heat, have been found at sites in India, Ireland, Scotland, France, and Turkey. Fringe researchers interpret these as evidence of ancient heat weapons. Mainstream geology attributes vitrification to deliberate construction techniques or natural processes. When Alexander the Great invaded India around 300 BC, his historians chronicled being attacked by flying fiery shields that dove at his army and panicked the cavalry. Emperor Ashoka allegedly created a secret society of the 9 unknown men, great Indian scientists tasked with cataloging all knowledge, including a volume called The Secrets of Gravitation dealing with gravity control. The Nazis developed the first practical pulse jet engines for V-1 buzz bombs. Some researchers have speculated, without conclusive evidence, that knowledge gleaned from Sanskrit texts may have indirectly influenced German propulsion research. The mainstream position is that Vimana texts are mythological and poetic, not engineering documents, descriptions too vague and internally contradictory for actual construction. The archaeological perspective holds that the texts reflect real observation of natural phenomena, meteors, lightning, volcanic eruptions, encoded in mythological language. The fringe view claims Vimanas were literal flying machines built by an advanced prehistoric civilization whose technology was lost in a cataclysmic event. No verified physical evidence has ever been recovered. But the specificity of those texts, 31 parts, 16 metals, 7 mirrors, raises a question the Nazis were not the only ones to ask. Where did those details come from? The answer, whatever it is, intersected directly with one of the strangest scientific movements in modern history. Number 3, the world ice theory. In 1894, Austrian engineer Hans Herbiger looked at the moon and had a vision. Its brightness convinced him the surface was made of ice. Shortly afterward, he dreamed he was floating in space, watching a pendulum swing longer and longer until it broke. From this, he concluded that Newton's gravitational pull ceases at 3 times the distance of Neptune. Herbiger collaborated with amateur astronomer Philippe Fauth to publish Glacial Cosmogonie in 1912, a 790-page treatise proposing ice as the fundamental substance of all cosmic processes. The core claim: a water-soaked dead star crashed into a supergiant star. The resulting explosion scattered frozen water blocks across space, forming the Milky Way, planets, and moons. Outer planets grew large by absorbing many ice blocks. Inner planets absorbed fewer. Meteors were ice blocks glinting in sunlight. Sunspots were caused by ice blocks hitting the sun. The theory also explained history. Earth had supposedly captured several ice moons before our current one. Each spiraled inward and crashed, causing floods, ice ages, and new geological strata. This accounted for biblical floods and the destruction of Atlantis. When critics demonstrated the mathematics didn't work, Herbiger responded that calculation could only lead one astray. When shown photographs of the Milky Way as millions of individual stars, he said the pictures were faked by reactionary astronomers. He wrote to rocket scientist Willy Ley, "Either you believe in me and learn, or you will be treated as the enemy." After World War I, Herbiger abandoned academic channels entirely and pivoted to mass propaganda. The movement published posters, pamphlets, a newspaper called The Key to World Events, and organized lectures that attracted thousands. Companies owned by adherents would only hire declared believers. Followers disrupted astronomical meetings, shouting for the end of orthodox astronomy. Astronomer Edmund Weiss dismissed the entire enterprise, noting that Herbiger's intuitive methods could equally well claim the cosmos was made of olive oil. The pipeline to Nazi power was direct. Houston Stewart Chamberlain, a foundational theorist behind the early Nazi Party in 1923, was an early supporter. After Herbiger's death in 1931, followers strategically aligned the world ice theory with National Socialism, promoting it as the German antithesis of Einstein's Jewish physics. Supporters declared that just as it took an Austrian Hitler to put Jewish politicians in their place, it took an Austrian to cleanse the world of Jewish science. The Nazi propaganda ministry reportedly stated that one can't not be a good National Socialist without believing in the world ice theory. Both Hitler and Himmler were listed among supporters. The theory was formally institutionalized within the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi Ancestral Heritage Research Organization, with dedicated programs and funding. It spawned movies, radio programs, journals, and novels throughout the 1920s and 30s. The mainstream verdict is unambiguous. The world ice theory contradicts every principle of astrophysics, thermodynamics, and orbital mechanics. The historical perspective notes its value as a case study in populist science, bypassing peer review, appealing to the public, framing criticism as conspiracy. But here is the surprise. The theory also attracted Jewish intellectuals, Viennese author Egon Friedel, Hans Schindler Bellamy, and leftists like Raoul Haussmann. The appeal crossed ideological lines, which suggests the underlying impulse, the desire for a grand unified explanation of the cosmos, is not limited to any single political persuasion. And it was exactly this impulse that connected the ice theory to the next obsession, a lost civilization that supposedly proved the Aryan race was the oldest on Earth. Number 4, Atlantis and the Thule Society. The Thule Society was founded in Munich shortly after World War I. Members identified Ultima Thule as a lost ancient landmass in the extreme north, the supposed capital of Hyperborea and homeland of the Aryan race. To join, members signed a blood declaration of faith certifying no Jewish or colored blood in their lineage. The membership list reads like a directory of early Nazi sympathizers: Rudolf Hess, Alfred Rosenberg, Dietrich Eckart, The organizational links were concrete, not metaphorical. The Thule Society purchased the Münchener Beobachter newspaper, which became the Völkischer Beobachter, the main Nazi newspaper. They sponsored the Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, which Hitler transformed into the NSDAP. Hermann Wirth, a Dutch historian and co-founder of the Ahnenerbe, believed Atlantis existed in the North Atlantic, stretching from Iceland to the Azores, peaking as a civilization 25,000 years ago. He identified its only remaining above-water fragments as Cape Verde and the Canary Islands. To explain the complete absence of archaeological evidence, Wirth claimed Aryans had evolved in an Arctic homeland 2 million years ago before building society on the now sunken landmass. Carl Georg Schaech, a folkish intellectual, placed Atlantis in the Atlantic in 1920 and described its inhabitants as blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans. His views were adopted by the Ahnenerbe, which was officially founded on July 1, 1935, by Himmler, Wirth, and Richard Walter Darre, the creator of blood and soil ideology. Its stated purpose was to find evidence that Germans descended from a racially superior Aryan civilization. The Atlantis narrative locked neatly into the world ice theory. Herberger's followers explained Atlantis' destruction as the crash of a previous ice moon, making Aryan ancestors survivors of a cosmic catastrophe. Himmler sent 3 expeditions to Iceland in 1938, believing it was the Thule area and Aryan birthplace. Teams searched for ancient worship sites for Thor and Odin. The Icelandic government imposed severe restrictions. Despite claiming to find a cave that was a supposed ancient worship site, it was proven uninhabited before the 18th century. Subsequent missions were met with laughter from locals. Pseudoscientists sought church records that did not exist and could not obtain excavation permits. One expedition could not even secure enough Icelandic currency. In Bremen, architect Bernhard Hütger designed buildings inspired by Wirth's theories. Edmund Kiss, an Ahnenerbe researcher, studied Andean temple ruins at Tiahuanaco, claiming their similarity to European construction proved Nordic migrants arrived millions of years earlier. The Ahnenerbe sent expeditions globally: Iceland, Tibet, South America, North Africa, Egypt, Russia, the Arctic, all searching for the same origin story. Alfred Rosenberg headed a parallel organization, the Amt Rosenberg, and tried to prove Jesus was not Jewish, but an Aryan Amorite. The mainstream position is clear. Atlantis is Plato's philosophical allegory from the Timaeus and Critias around 360 BC. No geological or archaeological evidence supports a sunken continent. The historical perspective suggests it may encode folk memory of real catastrophes: the theory, eruption around 1600 BC, Doggerland's submersion, or Bronze Age collapse events. During the war's closing days, Ahnenerbe members destroyed vast quantities of paperwork. Many escaped denazification and remained in West Germany's archaeological establishment until reunification in 1990 opened the archives. But if Iceland produced laughter and no evidence, surely a trip to the other side of the world, to Tibet, would deliver results. Or so the Ahnenerbe hoped. Number 5. Tibetan origins of the Aryan race. The 1938-39 German Tibet expedition was led by zoologist and SS Sturmbannführer Ernst Schaefer, born 1910 in Cologne. He had already completed 2 previous expeditions to Tibet and China in 1930-31 and 1934-36. Himmler wanted the expedition under the Ahnenerbe and pressured Schaefer to pursue Herberger's glacial cosmogony theories. Schaefer refused to include Edmund Kiss and demanded 12 conditions guaranteeing scientific freedom. The funding story reveals the tensions. Ahnenerbe Secretary General Wolfram Sievers initially refused support, deeming Schaefer's goals insufficiently ideological. Schaefer raised 80% independently from the German business community and the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. Himmler's condition was non-negotiable. All 5 members had to join the SS. The official expedition name placed German Tibet Expedition Ernst Schaefer in large letters with the Ahnenerbe connection in small print. The 5 members were Schaefer as zoologist and ornithologist, Bruno Beger as anthropologist, Ernst Krause as entomologist, photographer and filmmaker, Karl Wienert as geophysicist, and Edmund Geer handling logistics. Beger, influenced by Hans F. K. Gunther's northern race theory, measured the skulls and facial features of 376 Tibetans and Sikkimese people. He captured approximately 2,000 photographs and produced plaster casts of heads, faces, hands, and ears from 17 subjects. He collected 350 sets of fingerprints and handprints. Schaefer purchased 18 human skulls and observed Tibetan sky burials. Beger's conclusion actually undermined the premise. He found that Tibetans occupied an intermediary position between Mongol and European races, with European elements most pronounced among the aristocracy, not the definitive Aryan origin Himmler had hoped for. The expedition returned with 3,300 bird specimens, a complete edition of the Tibetan Buddhist Kangyur in 108 volumes, mandala examples, ancient texts, and one alleged document concerning the Aryan race. Krause shot over 10,000 meters of film footage, later assembled into the 1943 propaganda film Geheimnis Tibet, which premiered at the Sven-Hedin Institute. Vineyard performed magnetic field and gravimetric measurements around Lhasa for cartographic purposes and attempted to validate the world ice theory through geophysical data. Begere's darkest chapter came after Tibet. In December 1941, he proposed building a collection of Jewish skulls. In June 1943, he was sent to Auschwitz to select and measure 150 Jewish prisoners for anatomist August Hertz's skeleton collection at the University of Strasbourg. 86 Jewish prisoners were gassed at Natzweiler-Struthof concentration camp. Their remains were discovered when Allied forces liberated Strasbourg. Only one victim, Menachem Tafel, was identified until 1970. Schaefer later established an experimental agricultural station near Graz, experimenting with Tibetan grain samples for potential use in Nazi Lebensraum territories. Ahnenerbehead Walter Wüst claimed the Indian caste system derived from racial categories because the word for Kasi is Varna, and Varna means color. The mainstream assessment is that the expedition produced legitimate zoological and geophysical data embedded within a pseudoscientific racial framework that corrupted its interpretation. The linguistic connections between Sanskrit and European languages are real, reflecting migration patterns over millennia, not racial hierarchies. Schaefer moved to Venezuela in 1949, became a professor in Caracas, later curated the natural history section of the Lower Saxony State Museum from 1960 to 70, and never faced prosecution. Beger received a 3-year suspended sentence in 1971. The expedition measured skulls and cataloged birds. It also facilitated the selection of people for gas chambers. Both things happened within the same institutional framework, and that framework had another obsession, an ancient weapon said to guarantee victory to anyone who possessed it. Number 6. The Spear of Destiny. The object in Vienna's Hofburg Palace is physically unambiguous. An iron blade with an embedded nail purported to be from Christ's crucifixion, bound with silver wire, capped with a silver band, and sheathed in gold, dating to approximately the 14th century. It has been held by Carolingian kings, Holy Roman emperors, and Habsburg rulers. Its mythological power is another matter entirely. Trevor Ravenscroft's 1973 bestseller, The Spear of Destiny, claims Hitler first encountered the lance as a struggling artist in Vienna around 1912 and felt an immediate mystical connection. Ravenscroft's primary source was Walter Johannes Stein, an Austrian philosopher who allegedly met the young Hitler through an annotated copy of Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, found in a used bookshop. Hitler supposedly entered trance-like states while viewing the lance, and believed he was the reincarnation of Landolfo II of Capua, a 9th century lord excommunicated for practicing magic. Serious historians note that Stein never published any of this during his lifetime. Ravenscroft's account blends documented history with speculation and occult mythology. What is documented is the seizure. On March 12, 1938, the Anschluss, Nazi Germany annexed Austria. On October 13, 1938, the lance and 31 other pieces of Habsburg imperial regalia were placed on an armored SS-guarded train and transported to Nuremberg. The regalia were housed in St. Catherine's Church. In 1935, Himmler had commissioned a replica for his private room. Some accounts claim the original was used in occult rituals at Wewelsburg Castle, with the displayed Nuremberg lance being the copy. Himmler allegedly formed a circle of 12 SS officers at Wewelsburg, modeled on Arthurian legend, with the spear as their central relic. As Allied forces closed in during April 1945, the lance and other treasures were hidden in tunnels beneath Nuremberg Fortress, repurposed ancient beer cellars equipped with a power generator, living quarters, and air filtration. On April 30th, 1945, Lieutenant Walter Horn, a medievalist serving in the United States Army, recovered the lance from the vault. That was the same day Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. The treasures were returned to Vienna on January 6, 1946. In 2003, British metallurgist Dr. Robert Feather conducted laboratory analysis dating the lance to the 7th or 8th century, a Carolingian-era artifact definitively not from the 1st century crucifixion. 4 separate lances claim Holy Lance status: Vienna, Armenia ad Echmiad Sin, Krakow, which is a known medieval copy of Vienna's, and Rome, sent by Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II to Pope Innocent VIII in 1492. Colonel Howard Buchner claimed the displayed Vienna lance is fake and the real one was sent to Antarctica via U-boat, then recovered in 1979 by a Nazi secret society. The mainstream assessment: the lance is a genuine Carolingian relic with deep political significance, but no supernatural properties. Its power was always symbolic. Otto I used it at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955 to rally troops. Napoleon reportedly sought it after Austerlitz in 1805. The embedded nail may predate the lance itself. Its provenance as a crucifixion relic was a medieval political construction. The lance was one prize, but Himmler wanted something he considered even greater. And he sent a very specific man to find it. Number 7. The Holy Grail. Otto Wilhelm Rehn was born February 18, 1904 in Michelstadt, Hesse. His mother introduced him as a child to the legends of the Holy Grail, Parzival, Lohengrin, and the Nibelungenlied. At the University of Gießen, Professor Baron von Gall inspired him to study the Albigensian crusade against the Cathars and the massacre at Montségur. The Cathars require context. They were a dualist Christian sect in southern France who rejected Catholic corruption. They believed the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament were separate entities, one sinful, one good. The Catholic Church condemned them as heretics. In 1243, French Catholic forces besieged the mountaintop fortress of Montségur for 9 months. Upon surrender, approximately 200 unrepentant Cathars were burned alive on the Field of the Burned on March 16, 1244. Legend holds that 4 Cathar knights scaled down the castle walls before the surrender and escaped with treasure, possibly including the Holy Grail. In 1931, Ron traveled to the Pyrenees and explored the caves of the Sabarthes area, Ornolac, and the massive cavern of Lumbrives. He found chambers with Templar symbols alongside Cathar emblems and a mural of a bleeding lance. He identified Montségur with Montsalvat, the Grail Castle in Wolfram von Eschenbach's 13th century Parzival. He mapped Eschenbach's characters onto historical Cathar figures. In 1934, Ron published Kreuzzug gegen den Grail, Crusade Against the Grail, arguing a direct link between the Parzival romance and Cathar persecution. The book attracted Karl Maria Willigut, who passed it to Himmler. In 1933, Ron received a telegram offering 1,000 Reichsmarks per month to continue his research. The sender was Himmler, who had renovated Wawelsburg Castle in Westphalia specifically to house the Grail once found. Ron was an unlikely SS member. He was openly homosexual, a crime punishable by concentration camp under Nazi law, and privately anti-Nazi, attending dinners with anti-regime intellectuals. As he explained to shocked friends, a man has to eat. What was I supposed to do? Turn Himmler down? He formally joined the SS on February 29, 1936. His duties included researching Himmler family genealogy, traveling to Iceland to study Norse sagas, where he reportedly shouted that he wanted to see trees, and continued Grail research. His 1937 second book, Lucifer's Hofgesint, argued Lucifer was a positive spiritual figure misappropriated by the Church. The SS inserted anti-Semitic passages into his text without his consent. After being caught having sex with a man, Ron was assigned 3 months guard duty at Dachau concentration camp. The experience traumatized him. In 1939, he submitted his resignation to Himmler. The Gestapo reportedly gave him the option of committing suicide. His frozen body was found in the Austrian Tyrolean Alps on March 13, 1939, near the anniversary of Montsegur's fall. No official death certificate was ever produced. Ron described the Grail not as a chalice, but as either a perfect emerald with 144 facets, 144 engraved emerald tablets, or stone tablets with runic inscriptions. The mainstream position is that the Grail is a literary invention evolving from Chrétien de Troyes around 1190 through Eschenbach to Malory, with no historical artifact behind it. Himmler's racial framing, Cathars as an Aryan faith, the Grail as Aryan power, was ideological fabrication. Ron is widely cited as one inspiration for the character of Indiana Jones, and the artifact most associated with that character has its own Nazi connection. Number 8, the Ark of the Covenant. The biblical description is specific: a gold-covered wooden chest containing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, Aaron's rod, and a pot of manna, believed to carry the literal presence and power of God. The Anunnarbi included the Ark among its targets for recovery, believing it possessed divine or supernatural power that could be weaponized. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has claimed since at least the 12th century to house the actual Ark at the Church of Our Lady, Mary of Zion in Aksum. According to the Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian national epic, Menelik I, son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, brought the Ark to Ethiopia approximately 3,000 years ago. Ananurba researchers reportedly traveled to fascist-allied Ethiopia during Italy's occupation beginning in 1935, though documentation is fragmentary due to wartime destruction. Mussolini's forces conducted their own parallel search, viewing the Ark as both a spiritual and military prize. At least 9 countries have been linked to possible Ark locations: Ethiopia, Egypt, Israel, Jordan at Mount Nebo, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ireland, Rome, and France. Jewish tradition offers multiple fates taken to Babylon, hidden by King Josiah in temple chambers, or concealed by the prophet Jeremiah in a cave on Mount Nebo, as described in 2nd Maccabees. The monk-appointed guardian of the Aksum Chapel is the only person permitted to see the Ark. Guardians reportedly die young from mysterious ailments attributed to proximity to divine power. British scholar Edward Ullendorf claimed to have seen the Ark in 1941 as a British officer. Colleague Tudor Parfit later clarified that Ullendorf privately admitted he saw only a standard Ethiopian church replica, a tabut, not the actual Ark. The Ananurba's interest created an ideological paradox. As a fundamentally Jewish sacred object, the Ark's power needed reframing within Aryan mythology to justify the search. Himmler's Wewelsburg Castle was designed as a repository for recovered relics. The Ark would presumably have been housed alongside the spear and the hoped-for Grail. Franz Altheim and Erika Trautmann received Ananurba funding for a 1938 Middle East expedition studying a supposed racial power struggle within the Roman Empire between Nordic and Semitic peoples. In July 1943, as Allied bombing intensified, all Ananurba objects and documents were transferred to Weichenfeld in Franconia. Most were destroyed before Germany's final defeat. The Nuremberg trials led to the execution of Wolfram Sievers, who took operational secrets to his grave. The mainstream position holds that the Ark, if it existed as described, was likely destroyed during the Babylonian sack of Jerusalem in 586 BC. Graham Hancock's 1992 book, The Sign and the Seal and the Base. Institute's research teams have found what they describe as compelling evidence of a Nile transport route to ancient Kush. But no physical artifact has been recovered. No evidence confirms the Nazis found it either. The search remains one of the Ananurba's most ambitious and least documented undertakings. While some researchers chased relics across continents, others focused their efforts much closer to home, on a rock formation in a German forest. Number 9. The Externsteine and Germanic sacred sites. The Externsteine is a sandstone rock formation in the Teutoburg forest near Hornbad Meinberg, North Rhine, Westphalia. 5 towering pillars rise to 40 meters. The formation features carved chambers, medieval reliefs, and a chapel accessible only by a narrow staircase. A prominent 12th century relief depicts the descent from the cross. Beneath the cross is a bent tree. Nazi researchers interpreted this bent tree as the Norse world tree Irminsul being crushed under the weight of Christianity. Wilhelm Teut, an amateur archaeologist and Volkish theorist, first proposed in 1929 that the site was a pre-Christian Saxon sanctuary for solar worship. He suggested its features aligned astronomically with the summer solstice, connecting it to an imagined unbroken Germanic sun-worshipping tradition. His ideas were seized by the Nazi establishment. Himmler made the Externsteine his personal project, convinced it was a Germanic Stonehenge. He sealed it from public access for Ahnenerbe research. The excavations found medieval and early modern materials. They found no evidence predating Christianity. Contradictory evidence was suppressed or ignored, a textbook case of institutional confirmation bias. Roughly 90 kilometers away, Himmler was redesigning Wewelsburg Castle as the center of the New World. An SS Camelot. The Obergruppenführersaal featured a black sun mosaic on its floor. The crypt was modeled on Mycenaean Tholos tombs. Himmler envisioned the Externsteine as part of a network of sacred Germanic sites forming the spiritual foundation of a post-Christian Aryan religion. The Atlantis would serve as its priesthood. Rock carvings in Sweden and Norway were reinterpreted as evidence of an ancient Nordic master civilization. Ahnenerbe teams photographed and catalogued thousands for propagandistic use. Hans Reinert, appointed Reich Deputy of German Prehistory by Rosenberg in 1934, pushed for what he called the purification and Germanization of German prehistory. Sites that failed to yield correct Germanic interpretations were censored from public discussion. Only those supporting Aryan narratives were publicized. Gustav Kusina's earlier work, German Prehistory, a preeminently national discipline, had argued that archaeological artifacts could trace ethnic groups across geography. This was a legitimate methodological concept, settlement archaeology, but the Nazis corrupted it into a racial mapping tool. Kusina's framework was used to justify the annexation of Poland, arguing Germanic peoples had historically inhabited the region. The NSDAP co-sponsored solstice festivals as early as 1921. Speakers invoked Baldur the sun god and Siegfried alongside swastika symbolism derived from theosophical and Ariosophic traditions. The black sun symbol at Wewelsburg, originally a mosaic floor ornament, has become one of the most recognizable neo-Nazi and esoteric symbols worldwide. The modern archaeological consensus is that the Externsteine has genuine medieval Christian significance, but no evidence of pre-Christian Germanic temple use. The site may have had some earlier function, but the evidence has been so contaminated by Nazi-era interventions that objective assessment is extremely difficult. The complete Ahnenerbe excavation records were among documents destroyed in the war's final days, and the destruction of those records brings us to the symbolic system that tied the entire Ahnenerbe enterprise together. Number 10. Ancient Runes and Norse Mysticism. The Ahnenerbe's very first department, established by co-founder Hermann Wirth, focused on Germanic symbolism and especially runes. The organization's logo itself was rendered in rune-style script derived from the Lebensrunen, or life rune. The SS double sig rune was derived not from any historical runic tradition, but from Guido von List's 1906 Armanen rune system. List claimed to have received the runes in a mystical vision during temporary blindness following a cataract operation. He invented an 18 rune system that bore only superficial resemblance to the historical elder Futhark. Karl Maria Willigut, head of the SS Department for Pre- and Early History, claimed ancestral clairvoyant memory stretching back 228,000 years. He personally designed the SS Totenkopfring, which bore a Hegel rune for faith, a Sig rune for victory, a swastika, and a Totenkopf for death's head. Himmler presented these rings personally to SS officers as sacred insignia. Wirth believed he could decipher an ancient North Atlantic script linked to Atlantis, the world's oldest written language and the basis for all others. This contradicted established scholarship on Mesopotamian cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs, which had well-documented evolutionary paths from pictographic to abstract writing. Wirth controversially translated the Ure Linda book, a purported Frisian manuscript discovered in 1867, to support Germanic origins. Scholarly consensus had already identified it as a forgery. Himmler established a rune school within the SS. Officers studied meanings, meditation techniques, and supposed magical applications. Runic symbolism was integrated into insignia, tombstones, ceremonies, and architecture. The Ahnenerbe funded extensive fieldwork documenting rock carvings, inscriptions, and runestones across Scandinavia, Germany, and Iceland. Thousands of examples cataloged for the Wirth Symbol Archive. The Ahnenerbe employed pendulum dowsers, psychics, and astrologers during the war. The German Navy, the SS, and Goebbels' propaganda ministry all hired practitioners to locate enemy positions and plan tactics based on stellar alignments. In 1933, Erich Hanussen, a clairvoyant close to Nazi stormtroopers, predicted the Reichstag fire the night before it occurred, helping justify the imposition of martial law. Rudolf Hess sponsored astrology, cosmobiology, and esoteric medical practices throughout the mid-1930s. Himmler commissioned research into witchcraft, medieval Luciferianism, and devil worship through the Ahnenerbe, attempting to reconstruct a pre-Christian Aryan religion. The December 1920 SDAP winter solstice celebration featured speakers proclaiming the coming age had been prophesied in the Edda and the teachings of the Armanen. The November 9, 1923, Beer Hall Putsch battle cry featured concepts from Madame Blavatsky and Theodor Fritsch, invoking an eternal light versus darkness struggle with the swastika as the ancient Aryan sign of salvation. The historical reality is well established. Runes developed in northern Europe between roughly 400 BCE and 50 CE under Etruscan alphabetic influence. They were a practical writing system adopted relatively late in European history, not a primordial cosmic language. The evolutionary steps are traceable. Phoenician script influenced Greek, Greek influenced Etruscan, and Etruscan influenced the earliest runic alphabets. The SS runic system was a 20th century invention, using genuine historical symbols stripped of actual context. After the war, Ahnenerbe-designed runic symbolism was preserved in neo-Nazi circles. The Sig Rune, Black Sun, Wolf's Angel, and other symbols remain central to far-right extremist identity worldwide. Hundreds of archival documents show Nazi attempts to differentiate between occult charlatanry and scientific occultism, a distinction that proved impossible to maintain in practice. All 10 of these pursuits, Hollow Earth, Vimanas, World Ice, Atlantis, Tibet, the Spear, the Grail, the Ark, sacred sites, runes, operated under a single institutional roof. And understanding that institution requires stepping back to see the full machine. The Ahnenerbe, full name Forschungs- und Lehrgemeinschaft des Ahnenerbe, was founded July 1, 1935 with Himmler as president, Wirth as vice president, and Wolfram Sievers as secretary general. Its stated mission was to research the space, spirit, deed, and heritage of the Indo-Germanic people. In practice, it manufactured evidence for Aryan racial supremacy. At its peak, the organization operated over 50 departments covering archaeology, linguistics, folklore, astronomy, biology, and occult research. Expeditions spanned 6 continents. Funding came from SS budgets, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft private industry, and Himmler's personal circle. The Ahnenerbe operated parallel to Alfred Rosenberg's Amt Rosenberg, creating bureaucratic competition. Both organizations claimed authority over Germanic heritage research. The ERR Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg separately looted art across occupied Europe. The Ahnenerbe was the regime's mystical counterpart. Research was characterized by confirmation bias at institutional scale. Conclusions were predetermined. Evidence was selectively gathered or fabricated. Sievers oversaw both research operations and direct involvement in concentration camp experiments. In July 1943, all objects and documents were evacuated to Weichenfeld. During the war's final days, members systematically destroyed paperwork. Nuremberg led to Sievers' execution. Other members received varying sentences, while many escaped denazification entirely and remained active in West German archaeology for decades. German reunification in 1990 opened East German archives, enabling the first comprehensive academic studies. Films, publications, and expedition reports continued circulating in occult and conspiracy communities post-war. The institutional model, state-funded research providing academic cover for ideological claims, has been replicated by authoritarian regimes worldwide. The document destruction created permanent historical gaps, and the absence of evidence continues to be reinterpreted by conspiracy theorists as evidence of cover-up. The 10 topics form an interlocking mythological system. The world ice theory explained Atlantis' destruction. Atlantis provided Aryan origins. Tibet validated the racial theory. The Grail and spear provided spiritual authority. Each pseudo-scientific claim reinforced the others. Accepting one made accepting the rest easier, creating a self-sustaining ideological ecosystem. The Nazis weaponized genuine historical artifacts, real runestones, real carvings, real Sanskrit texts, by processing them through a pseudoscientific interpretive lens. The concept of ancient Indian astras, or divine weapons, mapped onto Nazi Wunderwaffen ambitions. Edward Bulwer Lytton's 1871 novel The Coming Race, which introduced the concept of vril energy, was taken as literal truth, demonstrating how fiction can be absorbed into belief systems when the desire for it is strong enough. The cross-ideological appeal of the world ice theory, attracting Jewish intellectuals and leftists alongside Nazis, suggests the underlying impulse transcends political alignment. The Cathars were reframed as an Aryan faith. Jesus became an Aryan Amorite. The Grail became an Aryan relic. Any historical element could be assimilated into the racial narrative if the interpretive framework went unchallenged. Anan Urba design symbolism was preserved through neo-Nazi networks after the war. The Hollow Earth narrative bridged seamlessly into Cold War UFO culture. Otto Rahn's story influenced the Indiana Jones franchise. The Base Institute and other organizations continue sending teams to Ethiopia, Egypt, and Israel, seeking the Ark. Graham Hancock's 1992 Sign and the Seal demonstrated that Anan Urba adjacent narratives can achieve mainstream publishing success decades later. The Vril Society mythos has been absorbed into New Age spirituality, stripped of Nazi origins and repackaged as alternative energy speculation. The Black Sun mosaic at Wewelsburg has been appropriated globally by far-right movements, divorced from its specific SS context, but carrying its ideological DNA. The internet has accelerated circulation of these claims, creating new audiences unfamiliar with their origins. Legitimate archaeological mysteries, vitrified forts, Mohenjo-Daro, Tiahuanaco, continue to be exploited by fringe theorists. The pattern of weaponizing real artifacts through pseudoscientific interpretation remains active in modern disinformation. The destroyed archives represent a permanent gap. What was lost can never be recovered, only inferred. These ideas persist because they satisfy deep narrative needs, hidden knowledge, lost civilizations, cosmic struggle that transcend any single political movement. The desire to understand human origins, lost knowledge, and ancient power is not a Nazi invention. It is a universal human impulse that predates and will outlast any political movement. The same curiosity that drove Rahn into the Pyrenees drives legitimate archaeologists into unexcavated sites today. Every culture has origin myths, lost civilization narratives, and sacred object traditions. These reflect genuine psychological needs for meaning, continuity, and connection to the past. The critical difference is methodological. Legitimate inquiry follows evidence. The Anan Urbi manufactured evidence to fit conclusions. Predetermined answers, suppressed contradictions, institutional coercion replacing open inquiry. Peer review, replication, and open data exist precisely because individuals cannot always police their own biases. The Anan Urba is a case study in what happens without these safeguards. The 10 topics in this documentary are not equally implausible. Some vitrified forts, sophisticated Sanskrit technical vocabulary, contain genuine puzzles. Others, Hollow Earth, the world ice theory, are comprehensively disproven. Treating all fringe claims with the same level of dismissal is itself a failure of critical thinking. The genuine wonders the Anan Urba encountered, runes as a real writing system, Sanskrit as a real linguistic achievement, Tibet as a real civilization with centuries of accumulated knowledge, were more remarkable than any pseudoscientific fantasy they tried to impose on the evidence. Every genuine breakthrough cited in this documentary, seismic imaging disproving the hollow earth, metallurgical dating placing the spear in the 8th century, DNA analysis mapping human migration patterns, came from honest engagement with evidence. The laws of nature are not secret. They are discoverable by anyone willing to test rather than assert. The fundamental laws of physics, chemistry, and biology are the actual ancient secrets. They have operated since the universe began. They are available to anyone who looks honestly. Innovation requires exactly the opposite of what the Anan Urba practiced. following evidence wherever it leads, even when it contradicts deeply held beliefs. The real world was always more remarkable than the fantasy. The distinction between curiosity and ideology is the distinction between discovery and delusion.